Welcome everybody to the webinar on how CFOs can use AI. We're joined by Richard Bursford, who's the Exec Director of iCFO Solutions, and he's the lead CFO at the Incremental Pathway. Adam Street is also joining us, who's a co-founder of the Incremental Pathway. And what the Incremental Pathway is will be revealed by Richard in detail throughout this webinar. So I'm going to throw this over to them. I think it's going to be a fairly interactive webinar. If you have any questions, if you can put them in the chat, Adam's going to be monitoring that, and he'll bring them into the webinar with Rich, and then there'll be some opportunities for some questions towards the end. It should run for around about an hour. Over to you, Richard.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. So first of all, thanks so much to Paul and the team at Absolute for setting the session up. And thank you all to everyone that's joined. I'm Richard Bursford. I've been a CFO for over 25 years, Deutsche Bank, Standard Chartered, fintech scale up. And recently I've been working and partnering with Adam at the TIP Group, looking at how we can embrace the power of GenAI for delivering productivity into not only our personal lives, but also into our organisations. I'll just pass on to Adam to introduce himself, and then I'll elaborate more on that.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. I'll just do a couple of things about why the Incremental Pathway. I spent my last sort of two jobs working for both Atkins and Jacobs, and the latter was about really transforming the business model from, I would say, a service-based professional services to a recurring revenue, and introducing technology into the offer. And it became obvious that the change was so significant, and it's one of the reasons many service companies challenge to transform. And in parallel to that, I built with my neighbours a building about 8 or 9 years ago in southwest London. All great return on investment. Unfortunately, the roof leaked, and AmTrust were the underwriter of the insurer for a 10-year building warranty wouldn't pay out. It's a £750,000 problem. And I used generative AI to get the insurer to pay out. They spent £250,000 defending the claim against me. And what that taught me and really gave me insight was generative AI is so powerful, it can act as any employee you want it to, and it is going to transform how we're going to work. And I thought, well, that's going to help service organizations create the time for change. And actually, as I got into the insurance claim in more detail in organizations we've worked with, having this ability to have free employees effectively is going to change every organization's operating model. But if you're a professional services company, even more so, not just from how you act and operate internally, but if an individual like me that knew nothing about insurance, property law, etc., can take on and beat an insurer, then the risk and surface area for organizations, when anyone's got a lawyer in their pocket, is going to be really quite transformative. So that was really the inspiration behind the pathway. It's called Incremental because it's about incremental, step-by-step, delivering results, and where the benefit is greater than the cost, rather than long-winded transformation program that costs a load of money and doesn't deliver any results. So that's really the bit of the background.
Excellent. Thanks, Adam. So first of all, why are we here? We're all senior finance professionals. We all have a huge amount of responsibility on our own shoulders, and we're all responsible for making sure that not only are we managing our own teams, but we're looking at how the organisation is performing and how it's delivering against what it strategically looks to do. Now, while I was in investment banking, I had large teams of people, and I could afford the time to actually structure how those people were working and allow them to deliver things into me so that everything was running with my own prioritization matrix, and I was delivering what I needed to across the organization. When I stepped in a fintech environment, obviously you have a much smaller team that you're working with, and those responsibilities are not only more have a greater breadth, but they also have a greater level of complexity in terms of how you personally need to apply your own knowledge to be able to deliver for the organization. Now, that requires a lot of external support, and that requires a lot of things for us to make sure that we're looking to external sources to support us with information. Now, that manifests itself in a lot of small consultancy spend, 5 grand here, 10 grand there, a lot of stress and anxiety around engaging those people that takes a lot of time away from how we're able to contribute to what we're trying to achieve for the organization. And so through looking to solve for those problems that really cause a huge amount of personal stress and anxiety, for not only myself as a CFO, but also across the whole leadership team, I've come to looking to see how the incremental pathway and how GenAI can actually become a solution for mitigating that personal stress and also for creating a trusted advisor in terms of how to look to optimize a way forward. So we're going to start with looking at a few slides. We at Incremental Pathway don't believe in talking about it. We believe in showing you how it works. So we're going to just give you a brief introduction to the Incremental Pathway and why GenAI is so relevant. We'll then use a presentation that's from one of the partners that we've worked with. It's based on a presentation we've worked with in the past, and start interrogating that through the lens of a CFO to start then exhibiting how that efficiency and productivity can be used through using GenAI as a resource and really enabling us to get to the crux of the decision-making process and the leadership role that we look to aspire to deliver, and then how we can implement that across our organizations. Okay, Adam's going to be managing the chat functionality through this. Please feel free to fire questions in. Time is tight, so we'd normally take 2 hours to do an introductory session through a one-on-one environment with a C-suite leader, CEO, CFO. We're going to crunch that into the hour today, so we'll run through it all and then we'll leave time for people to bounce back. But any questions that come up, please do pump them into the chat and we'll pick them up from there. So I'm just going to share. Sorry, Adam, you're on mute, buddy.
Apologies. One thing in the back, we've got Fathom running, which is going to get a transcript. It's not just to sort of share a summary of the meeting, but what we'll do in the background is at the end, I'll try and ask to get some insights and some sentiment analysis from how the session went today. We might ask you at the end to score it out of 10, and I don't want you to lie, because you'll find that generative AI won't lie and will be quite candid. So Richard, you and I are going to get measured by the audience.
We always like to do that. Excellent, good. Right, I've been able to given access to be able to share my screen, so I'm just going to jump into that now and we'll start with the presentation. Okay, can you see my screen there now? And yes, excellent, thanks Paul, appreciate it. So creating time for clear thinking. So why NI? Okay, AI is going to hugely disrupt everything that we know and do. Why is this so important for finance? Well, if you look at the studies that are taking place, it would suggest that between 60 and 80% of the finance function will be directly impacted by the uses of GenAI and the automation and the pace at which we're able to start analysing information. As senior finance leaders, it's therefore, in my opinion, our responsibility to understand how we can most effectively use this tool and get ahead of how it can contribute to us in our daily roles and how we look to setting up our teams for the future. The number one problem that faces executives, particularly in SME businesses and fintechs, I believe, is the fact that we do not have enough time to focus on the big picture, the strategic problems we're facing, and how we're prioritizing that in our day-to-day operations. GenAI gives us a real mechanism to start thinking about how we can start building productivity back into our day, how we can be more structured in how we're doing our working calendar, but also ensuring that we're looking at the future, not just the operational processes that we're being challenged with today. Now, the TIP framework is different. This isn't about saying that AI is a technology problem or technology issue to be addressed. Therefore, it is up to the CTO of the organization to deliver it. It's about saying that this is a leadership item to be addressed and for the leadership to understand how to embrace it. And that's what we're going to walk you through today. It's about opening your eyes in terms of how you could potentially embrace this in your daily routine and how you can embrace this for your organization. Sorry, someone's talking. I can't quite pick it up. Okay. The tip process takes a thin slice approach. What does that mean? You start with the leadership team at the top, and then you collectively then push that through the organization so that you have a greater level of effect because you're leading from a top-down approach rather than a particular silo of the organization being asked to disseminate up, across, and out. It's a 5-step approach, and the most important thing here is that it looks to deliver an immediate impact. The 1.1 sessions that we run as an introduction, of which this is a very thin version, is about ensuring that the people benefiting from the initial engagement, they themselves are able to improve their own productivity, and that time that is realized off the back of that productivity is recycled into thinking about how this can work and support them, and then what the impact would be on their teams and their operating business model. So 5 steps to success. 1, creating time. 2, how does that time benefit and kind of impact across the organization? 3, how do you join that dots across your leadership team to think about how you're going to embrace this? And then 4, what areas across your organization would be most appropriate to be focused on from a Gen AI engagement perspective? And then how do you push that across your organization? Okay, this page here just talks to you about the thin slice approach to give you a visual representation. My son's dyslexic, and I appreciate everyone doesn't appreciate things from words. So here's a visual representation in terms of that thin slice in the middle of the executives, fans out across the organization to give maximum impact through the amount of time you're investing in learning and acquiring new skills. It's about making sure that you're targeting the bits of your business where it would be most relevant and where it creates the most effective productivity gains for your organization and therefore by definition bottom line. What is the value that's created? Well, number 1, it's time. Number 2, it's focus. Number 3, it's productivity improvement enhancements, which gives you optionality around cost expenditure, growth, and your divisional focus. And number 3, ultimately, is about improving your EBITDA and your returns and making sure that your sponsors, your investors are absolutely delighted with how you are progressing and setting up an organization for the future. So that's it in terms of the intro. I'll come back to these slides at the end after we've looked at ChatGPT, and I will then talk to you around more specific elements as to how we could drill into this from a finance perspective. Now, I'll jump into ChatGPT now. I expect most people would have seen ChatGPT before. You should be able to see that on your screens now. ChatGPT is not the internet on steroids. It's very easy to think of it as being such because when using it from personal interactions perspective, it can just give you answers. The important thing about using ChatGPT, GenAI is access to a wealth of information, but it's up to you as the professional with your personal experience, with your corporate knowledge, with your acquired skills to use it in a way that is most effective to benefit you. Now, in order to run today's session, I referenced earlier that we've got a presentation that we've worked with our partners in the past. What I'm going to do in order to just get us running is first thing, I'm going to use the ChatGPT prompt bar in the area here, and I'm going to tell it what I'm expecting it to do for us today. Now, this is really important because ChatGPT works on a basis of providing you the most likely response that you would be expecting it to provide you given an input that's been submitted. Now, I've copied and pasted these down for the purposes of efficiency during this session into a workbook beforehand. Nobody wants to see the way that I type into the prompt bar, nor the errors that I would automatically put in there with my 2-finger digital style. But what I'm doing here, I'm telling ChatGPT my persona. I've recently been appointed an incoming CFO, and I've been provided with the most recent presentation from an upcoming planning meeting. We've all been in this situation. You turn up in day 1 of your job, you're given the latest deck or the most recent deck and told to get your head around the situation. I'm then telling ChatGPT that I need to analyze the materials to understand what it's telling me. And I will also then expect it to pause before it does any analysis for me to instruct it what I want it to do. Now, this is really important because ChatGPT, anytime you give it any information, will automatically start trying to give you information and solutionize for you. Now, I'll just hit the prompt bar in here. Instantly, it comes back to me. Okay, understood. Please go ahead and upload the files. Now, I'm going to use the little paperclip here, and I'm going to upload 2 files that relate to this company. Now, one here is a data file, which contains employee information. The second one is the presentation that's been associated to the work that we're going to be looking at. Now, you can see there by the fact that it's put those in. Those have already been uploaded into ChatGPT, and I'm going to load that information into ChatGPT and give it those as a reference point. Until you click to load them, it doesn't have them as a reference point. They're just there. Now, it's confirming that it has access to both the files, and it wants to know what instructions, as I told it to, it's going to expect from me in order to start analyzing that information. Now, I'm going to very simplistically start by saying to it, look, I haven't got time to read through this presentation right now. Someone's just dumped it on my desk. Please, can you summarize in a table for me who's presenting? What are the themes that each individual is covering? What are their areas of responsibility? What are their key priorities? And how does that align to the company strategy? Okay.
Now, Richard, just to give some context, that this is based on a water company, being anonymized, but it is based on real information, real functions, and it's a 93-page PowerPoint deck for a 3-day away day. So it's not small.
That's absolutely right. And I was actually going to open the deck up and share that with people in terms of just showing the actual size and scale. You can see on the thumbnails here exactly how detailed and how much information is included in the 94, 96 pages of this deck. Now, usually it would take ChatGPT a minute or two just to come back and to digest that information. But you can see here what it's done within seconds is it's gone back and it's told me who the people are that are presenting. It's told me what themes they're covering in the deck, what they're responsible for based on the information that they provide in the deck, and then it's actually summarized the key themes, the strategic themes that they've highlighted as being their priority within the organization. So as a new CFO, I might just have an org chart that tells me who these people are on day one, and I might have been able to talk to a few of them on the way in. But this actually shows me what people are actually focusing on and what they're talking to, not only the leadership team, but this information will obviously be shared with shareholders at a certain point in the future as well. Now, I'm going to be most interested in terms of who my outgoing CFO, what have they put into this information, and what have they deemed to be their priorities that the organisation is holding to account for. So there's things here that you'd expect: financial performance, cost management, risk management, but then there's efficiency in AMP8 investment. So there's obviously a big issue going on here around investments, budgeting, efficiency and targets. Good 101 for us guys. But then again, it comes back, strategic investments for AMP8. I don't know what this is. So I'm going to quickly start asking ChatGPT what's going on with regards to capital allocation, what's going on with analysis on the return on investments, and is there anything that the ChatGPT tool can help me to understand around the information that's been provided around the investments. So I'm going to say, analyze the current capital spending, look at the top projects, recommend reallocation strategies to optimize ROI. So I'm thinking, well, as part of the away day, they're obviously going to be looking at, are they being as efficient as possible, and look at what projects should receive additional funds, or is there anything we can deprioritize based on what the information is telling us. Now, remember, this is a 96-page deck, and there isn't a specific page on this deck summarizing the investments. They're all on separate pages. Okay, so ChatGPT is going through and it's identifying for me what the individual projects are. It's telling me that the biggest project has got a gap to budget of 122 million and a forecast overspend of 22 million. So there's a problem with capital and resourcing availability. It's telling me that there is a lot of ongoing change. It's telling me around the ROI for the investments, what's going on with them. But most importantly, what it's coming back to me with, obviously I could digest this at length with you all, but we don't have really time to do that during the session. It's summarizing for me where it believes, based on how I've positioned the question, where it believes my efforts as a CFO could contribute towards changing the problem statements that are being presented in the deck. Okay, it's presented saying that there's different projects that we can increase funding. There's different projects where we could actually look at different ways of achieving it. And then there's other projects where we could actually deprioritize in order to ensure that we've got optionality to achieve what we want to. It also provides you additional considerations that aren't referenced in the deck at all. It's looking at potential ways you could drive efficiency, mitigate risk, and achieve long-term growth. GenAI has identified these through looking through the 96 pages of that deck and ascertained that these are areas where I, as a CFO, can more appropriately appoint my efforts. Now, what would I do if there was no resource or no capacity gap for the organization? I'm going to ask ChatGPT to tell me if additional funds were needed, what options are there for us to look to identify additional capital? Now, it's going to answer this question based on its standardized approach. It's giving you a bullet point list as to what you should be doing in order to think about how to solve that problem statement. So it's saying we should reprioritize our projects. We're going to eliminate or phase down lower ROI. We're going to look to increase efficiency through internal savings. And we're going to look to review and align our asset utilization. Now, again, 96 pages, it's getting straight to the meat of what I, as a CFO, should be looking to talk to my leadership team peers about if we're looking to secure the long-term stability, efficiency, and success of the company. Now, it's still going. It's still coming up with the planning approach as to how we do this. There's a lot of information to read through. Now, what it's going to do at the bottom here in terms of the summary, it's going to actually summarize and give me for each of the projects that are in there, whether or not they've got a high, medium, or low impact. Again, I haven't told it to do this. I've just asked it to look at it for me. It's given me a priority based on what the benefits would be. And it's giving me effectively the skeleton of an action plan that I can go and start talking to the leadership team about in terms of really starting to think about what are the core issues we need to consider. Okay, so there is a need for additional funds. There is a need for reprioritization. Now, in finance, our questions always go back to, well, before we start going and beating up our leadership team about what they can do in terms of reprioritizing projects or doing things that they would need to champion, what can we in finance do, and what can we look across the organization to do in terms of looking at, well, can we save costs in order to contribute towards this problem that appears to exist within this information, as to yet we don't know the political environment or the opinions of the leadership team would be. So before we want to go and start throwing stones at people, let's take a look at the information that's provided in the deck and see what's available in terms of looking at cost saving options for the organization to see how we could be more efficient and more effective with what we've got in terms of our standard cost generators or cost drivers. So looking at energy use, because Adam, quite rightly alluded to the fact that this is based on a water company, what we're doing in terms of procurement, but also what we're doing in terms of our workforce. Again, the information in the pack is all it's got, together with a data file that just gives you a list of the headcount across the different divisions. Okay. Now, what ChatGPT is doing now is going through and it's thinking out, well, what are the main drivers of the costs within this organization based on the information I've got and what people are talking about to the leadership team? And what can I do in terms of doing cost saving initiatives against those. Now, some of these will be quite generic. Can we deploy smart meters? Can we think about how we're using energy across our business? Others are far more specific, about supply chain management, about labor cost optimization. It starts talking about how you can use HR tools to automate elements. It starts thinking about how you can digitize elements of the business, looking at your infrastructure. Now, again, it summarizes this into a recommended table as to where you could focus and simply take this away to start having conversations. But I'm not quite interested in terms of that. It doesn't really tell me what that would do in terms of what that focus on those different areas could contribute based on the size of the firm. So I'm going to ask ChatGPT to, based on the presentation, give me a high-level cost-saving analysis with annual savings that would be estimated for the business. Now, based on the information in the deck, it's gone away and it started giving you quantified variables as to what it thinks should be achieved based on the average information that is available to ChatGPT in the known universe as to what should be achievable for a company of this size, this level of complexity, with this cost base that it has access to. And again, it looks across all of those different elements and it effectively gives you an outline, a skeleton of a cost optimization model that can allow you to start eating into the cost gap that has been referenced as a priority for the leadership team that are discussing this. Now, we can't do anything with costs without creating a significant risk for our organization, or whether you have other priorities that these might come into problems with. So we're going to look at risk. Sorry,
Richard, it's good. You got a question in the chat, which is how do you determine the accuracy of the information? I mean, what you might do as well is just sort of, if you're new coming in, you might want to understand how well put together is the pack, which would then say, how much do you trust that information? So do you want to, can you answer that question and ask it to give you some insights?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did exactly this. When I received this deck, I actually did exactly that because my first instance as a CFO is, well, number one, is the information correct? And we've all been sat in meetings with away days where the global head of product turns up unexpectedly with their own schedule of numbers. The global head of sales turns up unexpectedly with their own schedule numbers. They've cut it for a particular country that you weren't anticipating that they want to spend half of the leadership team's time discussing. The first thing I did was actually ask ChatGPT when I received this pack to analyze the pack and ensure that there was consistency in the data that had been provided and that it had come from the same source as the financial information. So that's really powerful and you can start interrogating it in that way. I don't want to start doing ad hoc queries right now at this point in the session. We can obviously, if we were doing a 2-hour session, that's exactly the path we would go into. I'm appreciative of the fact that we've got people with quite diverse CFO responsibilities and organizational sizes amongst the community. So what I want to do is actually just stick to taking you through the different types of analysis. And then when we have session time at the end, we'll actually then come back to some of those questions where we can drill into it a bit further, if that's okay. Okay. Now, apologies. So we've looked at the information that's available. We've looked at the team structure. We've looked at the priorities that are presented to the leadership team and quantified those. We've looked at the problem statements that are presented and then how we as finance could potentially think about looking to our core finance team standard approaches to be able to mitigate some of the risks and contribute towards it. And we've quantified that through looking at the costs.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, hi, sorry.
Good afternoon. So what we'll do now is we'll jump in.
Sorry, hold on. I'm in the middle meeting. Hold on. I think I'm on mute.
You're not on mute, no. Thank you. So we'll input now in terms of conduct a scenario analysis based on macroeconomic factors like raising inflation or interest rates to show how this could impact cash flow, credit rating, and capital requirements. Why are we doing this? It's all well and good looking to save money for the organisation based on what the historical information shows us. if there are macroeconomic variables or external factors that are going to significantly impede these, we as the CFO need to be thinking about these now and building these in as well. Now, what ChatGPT will go, it will actually look to the external modeling information that's available, and it will start to say, well, what's happening in the external environment and what things would we need to be thinking about looking forward as to how we should think about what additional impact those might have for our organization. It's put in a cash flow impact in terms of what the rise in inflation could do based on the level of operating expenditure. It's looked at our credit rating, credit exposure. It's looked at broader scenarios in terms of how a more impactful inflation rate could impact us, and then a lower impact. And again, it's going to look to show us a summarized table of how that could impact us within the organization. Okay, now it's all great being armed with information, but what does the finance team need to do? They need to actually do the legwork to quantify and validate what that type of information does for us. So we're going to ask ChatGPT, look at mitigation strategies for high-risk scenarios and tell us what the company, it might use the company's cash flow and how it might impact our credit rating. Okay. Again, it's coming back to us straight away, providing us with information around how those scenarios will be impacted and what actions we would need to take further to think about how we would address them. Now, I appreciate that we're doing this quite quickly because of limited time, but the value around the ChatGPT environment is that it is exceptionally diverse in terms of how you can drill into information, where you can pull in your own specific information, and where you can look to it for external information to support you. Now, one of the biggest challenges I always found when I was at the FinTech was coming back to the big picture statement around, well, what does this mean in terms of the broader communication that we need to be thinking about to our investors? And when we're sitting in that boardroom, what is going to be the priority of our investors as we're presenting all of these great ideas in terms of what we believe to be the right way forward for this organization? Now, one of the pieces of information that's included in the presentation actually tells us that some of the investors, what organizations they're from, and how they voted at the last shareholder meeting in terms of supporting the organizational strategy. So we can actually say to ChatGPT, look, we know that information's there. Tell us what the priorities would be if we were looking at and talking to our shareholders around if we were going to be putting in place a cost-saving exercise, a reprioritize exercise, what would the response of our shareholders be to doing this? Now, there's a huge prioritization based on the shareholder sentiment around return on investment and projects, around about making sure that we've got rigorous project implementation, providing transparency, but also sustainability is absolutely key, as well as dividend stability. So there's quite a diverse set of requirements happening around the board table, and that needs us to think about how we would drill into that on a more specific basis. Now, the biggest project that we have, I know from looking at page 9 of the presentation, if I were to open that now, page 9 of the presentation includes this waterfall chart, which is just a fixed valued waterfall chart. It's by far the largest investment that the organization is currently undertaking, and it has the most material gap of any of the projects that are presented as part of the information. So what will I do? I can actually say, well, look, given that's what we know that the shareholders have already invested in and supported us with in the past, we need to start thinking about how we would use that information in that table. Now, it's a fixed image in that deck. So page 9 of the presentation includes a waterfall chart. It shows that it's got the 122 million gap. For me in finance, for me to start thinking about how we might redistribute some of the savings that we'd identified above, I need to first of all get access to that information, or I need to repopulate it in the data. Now, ChatGPT can take an image and actually convert it to any format you want. So I've asked it to provide me a table as a data file of the reference points that are included in the stacks of that bar chart. Okay. Now, through just simply asking a question to provide me the data, it's not only provided me the actual data points that go into that water chart, it's actually then started suggesting if I were to revise how that waterfall should look, it would say that this is how I should redefine those stacks based on its own assertions of the previous conversations I've been having with it, and how those priorities that I've given it would look in terms of redistributing the efficiency savings across the organization. Now, I appreciate I'm going quite fast and not giving much time for questions or errors here, but again, this is important by seeing and doing rather than us just talking about what's going on. So, given it's reprioritized my investment profile for me based on that program, coming back to the investors, who's going to have a problem with us doing this? If people have already bought into this information, who would I need to talk to? What messages would I need to deliver to the shareholders off the back of the investor presentations to ensure that we've got confidence of that investor community? So what ChatGPT is going to say is, well, hang on a minute. What you're telling is you're concerned about the investors on the changes I'm proposing and that you're saying you're relatively supportive of from the fact that we're continuing this conversation. It starts writing me a CFO script as to why we should look to change the strategic allocation of funding. And then it tells me what supporting points across each of these elements are that are directly aligned to the priorities of the investors that it has ascertained from the way that they voted at the last AGM. Okay. Now, these obviously can all be drilled into, and you can drill into any of these and create a roadmap for succeeding however you'd like to focus. Now, I'm going to say, well, ChatGPT, if I'm going to start putting forward so early in my engagement with the leadership team a transformation roadmap, I need to be able to quantify how the value of that is going to be delivering towards the broader organization. So I'm going to ask ChatGPT, I'm going to say, look, provide me a roadmap for the digital initiatives that are in the presentation. What financial reporting do we need to ensure that it's timely, it's accurate, and it's efficient? But more importantly, I can't just go into this blindly. I need a prioritized set of initiatives based on ROI and the immediate impact of those. Again, remember, it's only got the information that I've provided it as part of the presentation deck, but this is empowering me to have conversations with people far more effectively in terms of getting up to speed as to where the organization is looking to achieve. So again, it's provided that for me in terms of immediate impact, 0 to 6 months, medium-term impact from 6 to 12 months, and it's provided me longer term in 12 to 18 months. Okay. Now, what I don't know from a CFO coming into this organization perspective is, this sounds like a lot of change. It sounds like a lot of stuff that I'm going to need to do. I'm not even sure how well placed we are from a finance perspective to support delivering phase 1, which could be in the next 0 to 6 months. It talks about reporting and putting productionized process in place. It looks at putting things on a cloud-based data lake. That sounds like a lot of work with both the technology support and the finance organization getting heavily involved in that. And then it looks putting in BI dashboards. This is not stuff that's just simple to implement, and it's things that need to be done as quickly as possible if we're going to deliver maximum return on the organization. So the last thing I'm going to do here, just to show you the diversity of how ChatGPT can support you, and I'm going to ask it to look at the finance team, which all it has is the name of the individual, the length of service they have with the organization, and their role in the finance team. So I'm going to say, just take a look at the finance team and suggest how I might need to change the roles or what new skills we might need based on their job descriptions to be able to identify how we could look to really start moving things and pushing them forward. Now, it's telling me here, CFO, well, there needs to be a change to be much more strategic lines. We need to shift focus, including the data strategy, advanced digital literacy, and to lead AI. Okay, great. I'm new to the organization. I have these skills. That's clearly why they've brought me in to support it. But it also goes through each of the departments within the finance team, and it actually says what the role titles either should be changed to be focusing on and what their key requirements should be, but also if there are new roles that within the finance function would be really advantageous to really getting things running. So there's a data and analytics specialist, there's a digital transformation specialist, and then it identifies gaps that would exist based on the type of information that is available to it through the roles that exist today and how I might look to upskill the individuals in the team and what skills I might like to hire new individuals coming into the team to have to really leapfrog and accelerate the finance team's contribution towards mitigating the issues that exist today. Now, I could go further here and load in my own personal attributes information from my PACE surveys around how I like to work. I could load in the profiles from my finance team that are available to me through the in-house performance toolkits or through their own LinkedIn profiles, for example, to see whose attributes would lend themselves to these types of roles. But this can be used in an incredibly diverse way in order to really drive change and really get to the strategic intent of the organization. So I'm going to pause there in terms of the use of ChatGPT. The key thing here from a leadership perspective, we've just gone through what might take, sitting at your desk, we've gone through in about 35 minutes what could be a 2-month analysis with a huge amount of engagement around leadership, CEO, CTO, COO, organizational peers, around creating what the framework needs to look like. But we've got very quickly a key prioritization matrix. We've got an understanding of the problem statements, the size of the problem, mitigating actions for us to tackle, and how we can start looking at our own internal organization effectively today as part of coming to this organization as a new CFO. Okay. In terms of just transitioning back, because I'm conscious I do want to leave time for us to be able to interrogate this with you again, I'm just going to jump into the presentation again from a deep dive perspective. This just links in terms of looking at the 5 steps in terms of how we look at the problem statement around creating time for the individual at the C-suite level, looking across the team, looking at actionable items, and then delivering those actionable items. Okay, that's the journey that you're on. This is a chart that I've shared with every finance team I've ever worked in. Everyone aspires to be a strategic CFO and a strategic finance team. There's a whole heap of baggage that sits underneath this that we have to be on top of to have that right of being the strategic CFO. ChatGPT, GenAI accelerates our ability to ensure we're focusing on the right parts of the organization. Now, we've looked at a presentation in terms of how we can ascertain what our immediate day one priorities could be for the role of the new CFO based on a workshop agenda. ChatGPT can look at anything that you require it to deep dive in. And the more specific you are in prompting ChatGPT with regards to the problem statement, your existing way of working, what the problem is with your existing way of working, or providing structure around how you might want to change that way of working, ChatGPT will be your partner in delivering that. So in terms of the strategic items, capital management, investor relations, due diligence, we've just taken a look at capital management in 30 minutes as part of a 30-minute review as to how ChatGPT can start drilling into that for you. But all of the other underlying supporting foundational elements of the CFO role and your team's roles can all be drilled into using ChatGPT, and it will support you not only with in terms of providing a structure, but you can provide data and templates into it that it can support you analyzing to improve KPIs, additional information, sensitivity analysis, automation processing, etc. So it really is powerful in terms of how it can do that. So I'm going to pause and Jay, just say, Adam, did we get any items come through in the chat that I missed while I was unable to access my screen that would be good to bounce into?
Well, I was hopefully, I'm not a finance leader, but I was hopefully answering them.
Oh, brilliant.
Hassan was asking about skills. I said, you don't need any skills because think of it as natural language. You just talk to it. And I gave some insights around some startup scale ups and how much they're generating revenue with no people. So I think I've answered most of the questions. If there are any other questions I haven't answered very effectively while you were doing that, stick them in the chat or engage. What I was going to do now, Richard, is I'm going to take the transcript from the session and I'm going to put it into GenAI. I'm going to rate you based on the audience, the insights, having basically 30 minutes and just see what it says. But if in the chat, people could sort of very, very quickly, bearing in mind the time we've had today, raise a score between 0 and 10. Let's see what ChatGPT, acting as a chief people officer, would say, having listened into this call.
And this is a really important part. The response you receive from ChatGPT will only be as good as your question. Now, the question you ask it. Now, this raises a much broader manifestation in terms of your capability as a leader. And where I found myself actually really benefiting in personal engagements from my use of ChatGPT, it's actually enabled me to structure my own line of questioning far more specifically. So when I'm actually dealing with my teams and really dealing with real people, I'm less fuzzy with my question. I'm more direct and more purposed with my question because I've started using ChatGPT as a member of my resource pool to help me understand what it is that I need to do. And just taking that forward in interactions means that you can actually be far more specific with how you're working with your teams. But it's no use just providing ChatGPT with a generic blank piece of information. It's about applying your acquired knowledge and your experience, because the more experience you have and the more knowledge you have to help you structure your prompt and the question that you're asking ChatGPT, the more it will come back with an answer that is more relevant to you, that allows you to build this two-way engagement as to how you're able to get more effective use of this resource tool that's available to us. So people are being very complimentary, which is great. Thank you very much.
I thought 1 was the best and 10 was the worst.
I had somebody in my team that once did that as part of our net promoter score exercise, and that took a lot of explaining through the organization. Now, obviously, the more access you have to, we could actually start loading people's prior performance ratings, their objectives into this from a finance team perspective to help us as a leader to, I'll just stop sharing my screen. To help us as a leader to actually build out how we could actually start engaging. So I have my PACE survey, whether I'm blue, green, orange, red. I could take that same information from my team and it would help me understand how I could be a more effective leader for people that have very different personality traits for me. And it would even suggest what tasks out of the exercise we've just done might form the best bridge between me as a leader and my team as people that are going to be responsible for delivering that.
Right. Okay. Let me have a look. Ready? We've got my spelling's a bit bad, but can everyone see my screen okay?
We can.
Okay, so let's see what generative AI ChatGPT says.
So the document that Adam has loaded is actually just the download of the transcript from the call that we've had now, live, real time. These are effectively the same as having a note taker in the room with you, taking all the notes. Adam's just provided that full transcript that we've talked about.
Okay. 8 out of 10. So let's actually have a quick look at what the chat said. I think that's pretty fair, actually. And what's very interesting is it could be non-biased and non-emotional. I find that getting ChatGPT feedback about my performance is easier to take than that from my wife. And so in organizations, as Richard said, sometimes using it on ourselves, what do we do well? How well do we manage the meeting? Were there some quieter people with great insights, but we didn't get enough from them? Did we talk too much, etc., etc.? You sort of see why it can be so powerful for sales, especially. How well did you engage with the customer? Did you listen to their pain points? How deep did you go into some of their emotional anxieties? It isn't just about speed. Everyone thinks that Gen AI is about doing things faster. It is about doing things better. And hopefully this is a good example of some insights in the session today.
Excellent, thanks, Adam. I was conscious that one of the things that I only scored 6 for was allowing people time to provide feedback, and I'm conscious that's what we've cut the note taker off short of. So, is there anything that anyone would like to share or raise, or any questions out there that we can help you with, given the fact that we've flown through this at a pace of squishing it into the slot that we've got, which we're very grateful for the time of. But if there's anything that's burning, please do raise it, and we'll of course come back to you or ask ChatGPT to help us to do that.
That's answered a question. From a finance point of view, would you say I should use ChatGPT as a person consultant for high-level decision making, but the operational side of things should be done externally? So do you want to just put a bit of color on the have you got that, Richard? Can you see that?
Yeah, I think this is the great question, and I think as a finance leader, this is we're always thinking, where do we target things to be most effectively used within our teams, or is it something we use ourselves? Think of ChatGPT as actually having access to an infinite resource pool outside your office door. The beauty about it is that it can help you in terms of how you need to structure your problem statement by working with it and asking it questions. You can then use it to then provide more structured work efforts for how you want to direct your team. The beauty about the operational versus consultancy piece is it can do both. It comes down to how do you have time to engage it. So if you've asked your head of finance operations to work with someone like myself, or to start looking at how they can use ChatGPT, the way that they structure it, the information they provide it, the corporate knowledge they apply to it will be relevant to their role and their experience. So by definition, it's operating in an operational capacity. If it's somebody that's in your strategic team, finance strategy team, again, their questions and what nature of the information it's asking for support with would be in that direction. The most important thing I'd like you to take away from this, and this is the reason why a lot of the consultancy firms that we can all name that provide us with very small services for very big invoices, the reason why a lot of them have gone all in on providing ChatGPT and GenAI consultancy services is because we now have the ability to in-house and get better quality, more specific, more relevant information and insights through using ChatGPT ourselves than we do by paying for a third-party consultancy to come in and provide a generic information set and try and reverse engineer that into our organizations. So the use of third-party consultancy firms and the expense associated to that, we're now going to be able to make a judgment call and say, well, actually, if I had one additional resource that could specifically look into drilling and using ChatGPT for me in these ways, I no longer need to have this constant stream of 5, 20, 50,000 pound invoices coming through from third-party consultants, and I can actually go back to consultants where I've got to a point where I know I really need engagement and be much more specific and much more targeted about what support I need from them and what external opinion I'm really looking for, rather than just getting a broad generic statement. Hope that answers your question, Hassan.
Could be a good time to mention that we're running our next senior finance meetup on the 21st of this month, next Thursday at Smith of Smithfield, and Richard is going to be attending with one of his other colleagues from the incremental pathway, and he'll be happy to arrange to meet any of you. I'd advise beforehand to arrange that meeting, because you don't want to get swamped on the night and not get time to talk to Richard. But that's a good opportunity for someone to to get some FaceTime with Richard and ask further questions if you have any. On that note, just to keep in time, Adam, Richard, thank you very much for presenting today. That's really, really useful, really interesting stuff. For any of you that don't know us, we're Absolute Recruit. We're finance and IT recruiters across London and home counties. I'm assuming most of you do know us, but there might be the odd person that jumped on via seeing us on LinkedIn and some of our other marketing. If anyone wants a personal introduction to Richard outside of the senior finance meetup, just get in touch with us and we'll make an intro. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good day.